On this episode of One-on-One, we're going to talk to someone. I don't know how we're going to get all this in. Miss Mary Aucoin is our guest. When we come back, we're going to start off and throw more information at you. So get ready, get the brain ready. We'll absorb it. We'll be right back. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. And welcome back to One-on-One. As promised, Miss Mary Aucoin. Miss Mary, good to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And when I'm looking at, sometimes people send me information, sometimes they don't. We go down memory lane. But when I started reading all of the things that you've worked on and accomplished, I'm going, we're never going to work this in, but we're going to try. But I want you, just for the sake, I asked you before the show, Mary Grimmett Aucoin, your maiden name was Grimmett.
Correct.
And you told me Port Barre?
Port Barre.
Okay. Take me back to those days. Paint a picture for me. What was it like in your early childhood?
It was utopia compared to, today's times. A small town located on Bayou Catawba. There was one school where it was 1st through 12th. And it was in the shape of a U. You started on this wing, and then by the time you got to this wing, you were graduating from high school.
Wow.
My parents, Benita and Charlie Grimmett, were very, very active in the community. Mom was always president of the Parents Club, and Dad was actually mayor for 8 years. So they took pride. It was a bunch of just nice country people that settled into that area, mainly agricultural. There was Texaco's first oil field was right there off of Highway 190, which is practically across the street from where Port Barre is still located.
You just answered a big question of mine. Your mom was active in the community. Your dad was mayor. Is that where you get it from?
Apparently so.
Yeah.
I mean, she looked at the school and said, "We don't have a band." So she got a band of her friends, and the next thing you know, we had a band starting at the 4th grade.
And when I was reading over everything that you've accomplished, and I was seeing Edwin Edwards had asked you to start things, it seems like whenever there was something that needed to be done, your name popped up. Were you born with that ability to lead, or did you have to learn how to lead?
I was the oldest of 7, so I think just that particular thing helped you become a leader.
Yeah.
I can remember standing on a chair and frying eggs for my siblings while Mom was taking care of the little ones. The activities that went on within the little town, there was like a men's softball league back in the day. That was the big thing. All of these little settlements from Port Barre to Eunice to Church Point, all up and down in those areas. Everybody had a men's softball team. So, we'd go watch a lot of softball, and we played as kids in the neighborhood. We were a bunch of first cousins that were kind of gathered together because my dad and Mom lived on one corner. Right across the street was his sister and her family, and then across the other street was another sister and her family. So
y'all ruled the neighborhood.
We were a bunch of little rugrats, yes. Not very many toys. We made our toys, made our own kites, fixed our own bikes.
The toys were your siblings, huh? You had to go out there and play with the siblings. And I was asked, Grimmett is just not a familiar name here, but you said it was obviously mayor and everything. That was a big name from where you're from.
My grandfather was from the Louisiana, Arkansas area, the borders of the states,
Yeah.
and he was a logger, and that's how they made their living.
Wow. And I watch all those logging shows.
Oh,
You got to be tough.
Yeah.
That's a tough, and you got to know to work equipment. You got to be tough. And
But
was
they
that,
didn't have that equipment in those days.
Well, I'm about to say that it was probably prehistoric equipment back then.
That's
So,
right.
but you come from although your dad was mayor and all, it seems to me it's a blue collar mentality that you came from.
Yes. I mean, we were fortunate
Yeah.
in that Dad had a good job,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and Mom just worked hard, staying at home and doing things. And they had goals in life. We started off with a little rent house from one of the relatives, and eventually they built their own house to house all of us.
Yeah. When did you sense, Miss Mary, that you were talented and gifted in a lot of different areas? Let's talk about athletics to start, because you were all state, right?
Yes, there's never been another All-State girl at Fort Barry
You're
since
the
that,
only one?
and that was in 1957. Yes,
Come
not
on,
to say
Fort
that
Barry,
they haven't
y'all got to
been
get
great.
on the map here.
Well, I'll tell you the story.
Mm-hmm.
We played a lot of softball as kids, and Dad was a softball player. He was a good athlete.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he and Mom both played basketball when they were young and coming up, and from that same area, and so that was one of the main things. And basketball, it was softball and basketball. I was a good athlete. I was just had a natural ability. I was taller than most of them, and my dad built a basketball goal, and I was the first girl to learn how to shoot the jump shot. And they all thought I was a freak person coming into the games because I had mastered that jump shot.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
Well, that's probably a good way to look at your career. You did everything you were supposed to do, but maybe you weren't supposed to do. Were challenges just part of what made you tick?
I think, well, and everybody felt like I was the leader, so I was president of my class from 6th grade all the way through.
I saw that.
And yeah, I guess being the oldest of 7, having to help around the house, and you know, we had duties and everything else just to make the family work, and I think that's where it came from, and a tremendous amount of self-esteem.
Yeah.
You know, I believed I could do it, so I did it.
But did that come from watching? Obviously, in a lot of these situations, people are born with the ability to lead, but a lot of times, in a lot of these interviews I do, people watched. You watched your dad be a public servant. You watched your mom's abilities.
Mm-hmm.
You were like a sponge.
I was, exactly. And that's exactly right. And I could not wait. I wanted to be a basketball coach because I had a very good coach.
Yeah.
And had really developed good basic fundamental skills. And I knew that I could do the same. So that's why when I finished high school and went to, we started at SLI, and in my sophomore year, they changed the name to USL. Now it's ULL.
Yeah.
I went into physical education because that's what I needed to do in order to become a coach.
I saw in I'll call it a resume. I saw that everybody remembers their first grade teacher. Sometimes when I ask people, who taught you in the 4th or 5th grade? They go, I don't remember. But they all remember their first grade teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You probably remember all your teachers because of what you did, but you mentioned your first grade teacher.
Miss Wilson.
Yeah. What was she like?
Yeah. Very, very kind person, soft-spoken. And back in those days, the way you learned to read, you had these big, enormous books that they would put on the stand in the front of the class. And the teacher would read the words, and then we would read with her. And that's how we learned to read.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how fate sort of brings you some places. Ability brings you some places.
I believe that.
Skill sets bring you some places, but then all of a sudden fate intervenes. How much did fate intervene in everything? And we're going to list some of these in a little bit, but putting you on the path that you ended up on.
I believe that God has a plan for you. And if you just listen, and not be afraid to move forward on some of the challenges that are presented in front of you, you get to realize your dreams. I just had this goal of becoming a coach. I wanted to be a really good coach because I felt like I knew what it gave to me in order to be developed into an excellent player, And through the years, what I've really concentrated on is building self-esteem, and that's the reason why.
Were you an overachiever, or were you? Some people said, well, I just overachieved my whole life. Some people said, no, I just had all these gifts and I put them into play. Some people really overachieve and they do really well. What were you?
I worked hard at what I did, and I was surprised a lot of times at what I accomplished.
Yeah.
So I guess it was just fate. I just always kind of had an idea in my mind about where I wanted to end up.
Yeah.
So
the transformation from Port Barre
to
Terrebonne Parish, Houma, Louisiana. How did that happen?
Well, when I finished in January of 1961, and there was a position here, and there was not very many schools in the middle of the year that had openings. Back in those days, when a teacher was expecting a child, you could not teach beyond your 3rd month of pregnancy. So there was a teacher that they were going to have to put on leave at Houma Junior High. And Mr. LeBlanc was hiring and firing back in those days.
Right.
And he called me at the dorm in Lafayette and offered me this job. He said, if you'll come and take this junior high job, then we'll give you head of the PE department when you get to South Terrebonne. Well, that was like dangling the carrot in front of the rabbit,
Right.
So that's how I ended up here. The other job was opening was in New Orleans, and I came from a small town. I wasn't going to that big city.
You wasn't one of those New Orleans ladies, huh?
No.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
All right, so you get to, like you said, Houma Junior High, South Terrebonne High School. Back in that time period, it was probably being built, right?
It was under construction. It wasn't totally, it was ready that fall, but in the summertime, Mr. Walker, who was the first principal, had called me and wanted to meet with me, and he wanted to show me the facility. So, yeah, they just had boards where the steps were the stairs going up to the second floor. But I remember that. It was still under construction. But come September, it was ready.
And I'm trying to recall, was it Kenneth Walker?
Yes,
Okay, I couldn't
Kenneth Walker.
All right. And what was it like at South Terrebonne? My sister taught at South Terrebonne, I want to say 33 years. Well, she was 33 years.
Who was your sister?
Myrna Falls.
Okay.
So she retired at South Terrebonne, but the kids over there were so down to earth
Oh, I loved them.
and just
Oh, those country
salt of the
children.
earth.
Yes. I mean, they were all kids like I was. They came from little small communities, you know, and very, very polite, very well disciplined, you know, had no problems at all. I was 20 years old teaching 18-year-old seniors.
Yeah. Well,
It was amazing.
destiny.
Yes.
Again.
Yes.
I want to ask you.
The school spirit was unbelievable because they had been given a choice, the seniors did, to stay at Terrebonne High School or come to the new school. And I mean, many of them, most of them that were from the southern area came to South Terrebonne. So, I mean, when we would have a pep rally, I thought the auditorium was going to cave in. And Mr. Hal Copes was our principal at the time because Mr. Walker had an illness and he wasn't able to start it off. But it was great.
But you got to watch women's sports, or girls' sports for that matter, because they start young. Now, it wasn't like it is now.
No.
You know, I mean, the girls, I started covering Vanderbilt girls softball back in the 80s. And Coach Albert had them so competitive. And so he was pushing buttons that I'd never seen in girls' sports before. It seems to me you might have been before your time because you were determined, being an all-state athlete, but in fairness, girls really didn't have the opportunities
No, we did not.
that the boys have. But that's really started changing at one point.
It did.
You had to be elated when
Well,
it started changing.
That's right. But us tomboys, quote unquote, because that's, if you were very, very active, you know, a lot of people would say that. But when I got to UL, as I progressed in my studies, I was working my way through having little jobs on campus. And my last 2 years, the professors that were in the girls' PE department really encouraged me to come and work there, you know, my last 2 years. So consequently, I was able to run, we had co-ed recreation, and I was in charge of that. And we also, I taught tennis and archery to freshman classes when I was a senior.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.